Did your company just go IPO? Maybe you got a lot of extra liquidity from the stock market that you want to use for your primary home. Maybe you're moving from a different city or different area altogether and moving to the Bay Area and are wondering, well, where are the wealthiest people in the Bay Area actually living? Today, we're going to be going over this specific category. We're going to be talking about homes that are $5 million and up in a category first of what's going on in the $5 to $10 million range and what's happening between, let's say, the $10 to $20 million range. So you can see, one, where they are, two, what's actually happening with the market. We're going to be looking at the actual data itself, none of this fluff piece from the outside media. You're going to see exactly what's going on. And of course, if I can help you with your move, I would love to certainly do so. If you look at the stats, 90% of you that are watching this video have not been subscribing. So you gotta take a pause, subscribe, and then we can resume and going on over all the value add that I'm giving. My name is Spencer Su. In the last 7 years, we've helped over 350 families with their moves in the Bay Area. And every single week, we provide insights about the data or local neighborhoods, tips and insights that other people do not know about. So let's get at it. Let's take a look first at the $5 to $10 million range. Okay, let's break it down first. So this gives you an overall view with all of the different activity that's been going on between the $5 to $10 million range. Green means it's active on the market. The red means it has already sold in that range. And then the orange and yellow, those are the pending ones. Now, if you take a look at it, it is going to be dominated by particular areas, right? Certain areas are going to have a whole lot more just based off of where, quite frankly, commute and the wealth is. So you can see San Francisco. San Francisco has no shortage of fantastic properties like this, right? You have places like some parts of the Castro, Noe Valley. Those are the $5 to $10 million mark. But the best places are usually on the places up more north, which are more related to the Pac Heights area and that region altogether, where you're going to see a lot of the action. Now, I'm not going to be going in great detail. I got a lot of other content in my other YouTube videos that talk about where people choose to live and what's going on in different parts of the Bay. But I want to give you an overall view where these kind of homes and where these people are. Now, if you look at south a little bit, you have a lot of good options between like Hillsborough and Burlingame. As you go more south, this is where you see this massive cluster, right? Places like Portola Valley, Woodside, Menlo Park, Atherton, Palo Alto, a lot of Mountain View, right? Los Altos. That's a giant cluster that you see as the biggest concentration of wealth in all of the Bay Area. And then as you move more south, you'll notice places like Saratoga, Los Gatos, Montecito, that they will have options. Now, you do have a few others sprinkled throughout the area, right? Make no mistake, the places like in Evergreens or Silver Creek area, there are a few at that category. You have places like Mission San Jose that have done well. You have places like the Ruby Hills Estates in like Pleasanton, this whole like little community, very small community, but that community also has some significant wealth. And then you can see there's a few like in Alamo if you happen to be out there. Now even places like Danville, Blackhawk will also have some, but not nearly the same kind of density. Now if you take a look more north, places like even Lafayette, you can see has some, but these are pretty rare, but they do have some really large homes there, but that's not where you're gonna see the majority of them, right? And make no mistake, even a place surrounded by Oakland of Piedmont, you also have some. Now, this is like the high level. Where are all of the homes at? Now, the most important is not actually what's green, because they can list their home for whatever they want. And the fact that like nothing has sold in that area just shows like the velocity and turnover isn't either that good and or they may be overpriced. And so we're gonna be talking about like in general, like overall stats. And I'm going to give you some deep insights about this. And this is why the MLS, which is what I have access to, is so much more useful than a Redfin and Zillow, but it's only for agents if they know how to use it. So if you take a look at this, the product itself, amongst all the areas, I basically covered like most of the Bay Area outside of Marin County. But let's say all of these areas that you showed up, most of the Bay, on the homes that are available to be purchased right now, there's 220 out of the 469, okay? So that's some interesting just stats, like basically half of them are on for sale. And keep in mind, this is the stat, as you can see, since the last 3.5 months. So this includes all the ones that have actually sold over that time period. Now, if you go back to it, how many are actually pending? If we look at that list, the pending figures are actually quite good. And these will ultimately usually close within 30 days or so. So you can see here on this first page, you have 30 And then if you look at the next page, because I can only have 250 at a time, so you get the 30 plus, so 63 homes that are pending, right? So that means ultimately there's about a good 200 homes or so that have actually transacted. Let's just kind of take an overall summary of this. 186 over the last 3 months. So if you do some math, it's been about 3.5 months. Maybe about 60 homes a month have transacted, which is good. About 15 homes every single week are selling and closing in that range. Now, I have some more interesting things I want to see, right? Let me show you this stat here. Amongst those that have sold, what are things that are most interesting to me? I wanted to see, like, what is the days on market? Like, how long do these typically last? This column here is what will show the days on market. So amongst that list, you have kind of interesting stats, right? For those that have been expecting or wishing something for off market, while they do occur, this stat is a very low number, right? It's 21 out of the 180 that have actually transacted. Now, whether these are a fair price or not, that's a completely different question, but about 10% in this category has transacted at that range. Now, what that means also, a majority of homes do not transact in that. Now, you could see though that this market still moves very quickly, right? Take a look at this. All of these homes got into contract in less than 2 weeks. So even in this category, 75 of those homes have gotten a contract in under 2 weeks. And if you expand that to under 30 days, you can see that amount goes to 104. So basically, if you add the ones that didn't hit the market, about 120 out of the 160 have all been transacted within a month, which is a heavy majority. Now, does it mean some of these others that have been on the market for much longer don't move? It depends, right? And that's something I want you to be really, really mindful of. When you see these numbers, if the majority of homes that are priced fairly or priced where the market will be, even at this category, will move within a month, there's actually a lot of homes, let's take a look at this, that are just straight up overpriced, right? You have a lot of these homes, I would say a lot of these homes that are on the market for more than 2 months, even at this price category, you hope that there was some room for them to go down, but the reality is sometimes some of these sellers don't want to do anything, right? They don't want to make a move. And it could be something related to the property itself, or they may have a specific price, but there's no real distress for them to sell. Because look at this, amongst the 220 homes that are on the market, 200 of them, so what is that, 90%? 90% of those homes are on the market for more than 2 months. So it's not, while you have more inventory, you can see more than half of everything that has ever come up or has transacted may be overpriced, but they're not willing to really make much changes. Now, are there people that will ultimately buy them? Potentially, but are they more likely to actually delist and expire because they didn't have either the right guidance or the right expectations, or they just don't care? That actually may be a big part of the equation, right? So when people are looking at these homes, your search is actually a whole lot smaller than you may think, because your goal is to ultimately find a place that is suitable for you, but nobody really wants to feel like they're overpaying. But when you see that more than half of these homes that actually ever do show up, period, in the last 3.5 months, if not, these are actually been on the market longer. So this is technically data for the last 4 or 5 months. The actually search of those that could actually work is way smaller than you may think. So hopefully that gives you the understanding, but also the realization as to what it takes, right, to buy a place even in this category. Because even though you have more liquidity and you have more interest, and maybe you're moving up from a smaller place, or you're just moving from a different area, you also want to be mindful of what this is. And my goal is to be able to share this light with you, but also help you figure out, like, where are those other options that could work, and what do we got to do to win it? Because you can see a majority of the homes that are priced fairly or low, they will sell within a month. Right now, I want to show you a few other stats about this category. Let's go back and look at this category one more time. I want to show you 2 more interesting stats. Number 1, related to the ratio. Let's take a look at those, right? So we saw, like, okay, wow, there's a good amount of homes that are ultimately moving quickly. So let's look at those, right? That actually have moved very quickly. So let's look at the ones starting here, the ones that actually were on the market. And you can see some trends, right? This is the list price, and this is what it ultimately sold for. So make no mistake, they can still list it really low, and you can see the outcome. Listed at 6.5, sold for 7.625. Listed at 7.3, sold for 7.3, 6.95, 6.95, 5.5. This one actually went a little bit low, 9.25 to 9.1, 7.195 to 7.520. You can see the trend. Most of the ones in general that are selling this quickly, they tend to be priced either fairly or generally a little bit low. Right now, I'm not saying in general you're going to have massive variance, but you can see like if it's priced fairly or low, it can still go up quite a bit more. Look at this. Listed at 7, sold for 7.8. Right? Listed at 5.9, sold for 6.35. Now, some could go a little bit below. That's not like crazy or anything like that, but you can kind of get an idea. If they price it fairly, it will still move quickly. Now let's take a look at those that have been on the market much longer. So let's take a look at the ones that are, let's say, over to 2 months. And let's see kind of what happened with those. Now keep in mind, this left one is the original list price. So look how far off they got it wrong before. Listed at 9 million, sold for 6.5. Listed at 7.75, listed at sold for 6.5. Listed at 8.2, sold for 7.7. Right? So you can see like there's quite a big gap as to what they had hoped for before and where they end up to be. Look at this, 7.5, sold for 6.25. Let's say 11, sold for 4.8, 8.8, right? Most of them will be very overpriced. Look at this, 8.25, and then sold for 5. Now, it's kudos to them and their agent to also make adjustments to make it work. Otherwise, they'll just be sitting on the market forever and ultimately expire, right? And then nobody ultimately wins on that. But you can see, like even good agents could get it wrong, and time may tell. But you can also see if you didn't understand the numbers, you may have hoped for some of these other properties to have actually expired, but they actually went away very quickly and they may have gone for more. The last thing I want to point out is this. One of the many questions I get from a lot of clients, especially a lot of my clients that are in this market and competing for these, is what percent of these that are sold are actually in all cash? So in all cash, the way that it works is that they will transact, I would say, usually under 10 days. So really anything under 10 days, we'll exclude these 0 because they didn't have those stats. Usually under 10 days, that is considered all cash because a loan, unless you really push it, isn't going to generally be that case. So you can see amongst those that are in that 10-day category, look at this. You have 31 of the homes, right? 31 of the homes out of the combined 173. So what is that? 20%? Maybe a little bit less than 20%, right? So there is a good amount of all cash, but you're not competing with only all cash, right? And so that's something just to be mindful of when you're competing in that market. All cash is certainly still valuable. 20% are still doing it, but it's not the majority. The majority are using actually loans. Now, so I wanted to show you this, right? Because this is the $5 to $10 million category. Now, I do have some clients now that are very in a fortunate position. They're looking at above this, right? So let's say they're looking at the 10 to 20 million mark. Now the question is, what is going on with that? Obviously, the buyer pool is much smaller. The inventory around is smaller. You can see there's a total of 117 homes that are combined of both on the market and also those that have sold. So let's break it down for you so you can see what I just shared previously. So if you look at the areas itself, where are these? Right, you can see San Francisco, most of the northern parts will have some good amount of options. The area around Hillsborough is still a very prime spot. You can see back down south, that's still the global cluster of these types of properties, right? And then you have a few sprinkled in other areas, but you can see all these others in the other area are all green. That means they're all for sale. There actually isn't any transactions there. And there's many reasons for that. Number one, when somebody has that kind of price range, yes, you can get an amazing house in Saratoga, right? But the question is, would people want to be out there if they're going to be spending that kind of money? Maybe they'll get something that was not as good, but in the prime area of the Atherton, Menlo Park, Los Altos, where the median price point is a lot closer to the $10 million mark if you're on the lower end of that range. So just really important and really mindful for people. Now, even amongst that, you can see even a place like Hillsborough has some that's transacted, but there's actually a good amount that's not selling because the median price in Hillsborough is not as high as it is in Atherton, right? The median in Hillsborough depends on the month. It's around plus or minus 6 million. You look at San Francisco, same thing, right? Like not a lot are actually transacting. They may sit on the market, they may be on the market, there could be amazing properties, but most are not choosing to do so. But nevertheless, without a doubt, there are plenty of these homes transacting. Now let's look at the same data that we just looked at previously, right? There's 117 homes here. Amongst that, 82 are for sale. If you filter that down, how many are actually in contract right now? You can see, what is it, only like 7 or something? 7 homes in contract. If you look at the rest, this will be a whole lot smaller. You can see a total of 28 homes in the last 3.5 months have sold. So if you look at that math, that's equivalent to about 7 or 8 homes a month. So equivalent like 1 or 2 homes a week are transacting for that amount. Now, a cluster, as you saw, was in the area that I brought up. Now let's look at some of the data about that too, so that you can get informed about it. So amongst this list, 4 homes sold without hitting the market. So 4 out of 28, 1/7. So maybe 12-ish%. So it's certainly like there's more of it. Now, whether they're a good deal or not is a different question. You can still see a majority are still transacting just like every other house. Now, same kind of feedback though. Look at this. The ones that have been, look how many have gotten in contract in under 30 days. So you can see how quickly things move. So I remember there was 28 homes and 15 of the 28 homes got in contract and finished in under a month. Not finished, but got in contract in under a month. And if you pull that up to the next 2 months, that brought up to what? 19 homes out of the 20 something. So same story, right? Now, if we go back and see how many of these homes on the market have been on the market for more than 2 months, it's actually a similar story where I just shared, right? Look at this number. Like it's a pretty big number. 41 homes, right? Out of the 41, actually out of the 82-ish, right? Have been on the market for 2+ months. So same kind of story that is happening in this category, where there's a lot of people that don't actually have much distress. They would obviously like to sell, that's why they're even putting it, but maybe they're just fishing for a number 2. Or maybe there are more of those outlier trophy properties that is really hard to sell. So when you are even buying a place, and let's say you're buying well above the median price of an area, you have to be mindful of that, because when it comes time to resell, you may be in the similar boat of what you need to do, right? So just be very, very mindful of this strategy and just being like, look, does it make sense to spend that kind of money? How long will it take? But what's also very impressive is that, as you can see, a lot of these homes are still very liquid, as in these homes are still moving very quickly. A majority are going to be selling in under a month. So you have to be able to have that data-driven approach and understand, using someone like myself to help analyze, look, does that make sense? Or should we wait and we'll probably get a good deal because they have no choice? Or we got to go after it because maybe it's underpriced and we have to make a move. Now let me show you how many of these are in all cash, right? So how many of these are actually in all cash? Amongst this category, 5 of them. 5 out of the 28 are in cash. So you can see a majority are actually using finances still, right? Maybe you can include some of those 11 days ones, but those you can potentially also do it with a bank fast enough. But you can see there is a good amount of all cash offers, but a majority of them are still being regular loans. What that also shows you is how much foreign money is actually coming in. Not that much, right? These are all individuals, like someone that may have been working at NVIDIA and done well, someone that is at Databricks, OpenAI, Figma, all these companies that are either in the liquidity phase or they just recently IPO'd. And there's many executives at Meta and Google and Apple that can certainly afford a lot of these homes, but it gives you a clear breakdown, because all of this is very transparent, right? It gives you a very clear picture as to what is actually happening in that local market, but also for me to be able to hopefully be a guidance to you, to strategize for you. Where is the best place? What are your suitable options? And then as you see it, there's not that many homes that are worth buying. Let's just say that, right? And so if it does make sense, we do have to go after it and we have to be ready to go. So if this was helpful, I hope it was, because I haven't done this data-driven analysis on Zoom in a while for now. But if it was helpful, I'd love to help you with your move. And maybe you're not in this category. Maybe you're trying to eventually get up there. All my clients are getting into that category now, which is amazing. I'd love to set up a Zoom strategy call and go over a game plan and consultation with you to buy, sell, and figure out your next steps. My phone number is 408-547-4590. Once again, 90% of you are not subscribed. Subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye now.